The energy, the faith, the devotion which we bring to this endeavor will light our country and all who serve it. And the glow from that fire can truly light the world.
Hello, my dear friends of the Global Network, and welcome to the Crash of the Course US History. Today, in this very captivating short documentary film, we're going to talk about the Vietnam War, and specifically, draft avoidance. I'm your host, Maxim Tachilkin, a co-host, Alena Tachilkina. And let the show begin. In 1967, more than 300,000 young Americans checked their mailboxes, opened the envelopes, and saw these words inside.
Greetings. You are hereby ordered for induction in the Armed Forces of the United States.
It is horrifying how a 15-word long line can cause so much panic, terror, and at the same time anticipation. However, it was not a surprise for them because this generation of draftees lived in constant fear. Although relatively small numbers of people were drafted between the Korean War and the Vietnam War, the United States of America had been constantly, since the World War II, operating the draft process. But when President Johnson dramatically escalated the war in Southeast Asia, the draft calls almost tripled, respectively. So did the stories of people who had managed to avoid the draft. Most of the people who successfully dodged the draft were wealthy Americans or college undergraduates. The question of the legality of dodging became more about the sizes of the dodgers' pockets.
Most of U.S. soldiers drafted during the Vietnam War were men from poor, working-class families. The least politically empowered sections were mistreated. As a matter of fact, American forces in Vietnam include 25% poor, 55% working class, 25% middle-class men, but very few come from upper-class families. Many soldiers came from rural towns and farming communities.
One of the most popular ways to dodge the draft was to make up a health condition. Soldiers with even minor health deviations were not worth sending to war and therefore money of the taxpayers. It would be more efficient for the army to find a healthy soldier that could bring more contribution to the fight. So while wealthy youth would simply purchase forged health documents, others would just pretend sick by pricking their arms to simulate drug addiction or use ink on cigarettes that supposedly produced temporary patches on the surface of the lungs to simulate tuberculosis. Other ways to dodge the draft were pretending to be a homosexual, getting married and somehow have a baby in between the draft lotteries, and last but not least, and to be honest my personal favorite, run away to Canada! Oh, Canada, the mother of hockey and the land of the wild.
Thank you, Maxim. And now let's get back from Canada to America in 1960s. Nowadays, letters of draft dodgers' confessions appear across the internet. All of them carry a simple message: young men's inability to choose something worth fighting for. Eric Schenster, one of the people who successfully avoided the draft, decided to share his story. Schenster was in high school in early 60s. Even at that time, some of his friends were already drafted to the US forces.
We felt that the war and the draft were bad, but I didn't fully understand what my friends were going through. My own experience was too different. I was good at math, so I knew I'd be going to college, and I'd automatically get a draft deferment. Also, I felt less nationalism than most people. For me, it would just be an inconvenience, not a great hardship, to flee to Canada, at the same time a safe haven for draft dodgers. I knew that I would never wear a uniform.
When Schenster attended college, the question of the draft came up again. Then he remembered a promise he made to himself during his high school years and sent the draft board a short but significant to his story letter.
Dear Draft Board, I feel sorry for President Nixon. He must have such a terrible childhood. Why else would he be bombing all those Cambodians?
Unconsciously, the 25-word letter got Sangster out of the draft. The draft board classified him as mentally ill, therefore he was unfit for military services. Then he joined the anti-war movement, trying to get the rest of the drafted youth out of the hell where they were wasting their lives for no purpose. The college students had their ways to show their indignation, burning their draft cards. Eventually, the draft dodgers, combined with all of them convicted anti-war resistors, had managed to reshape the attitudes of the US president by simply overpopulating their prisons. And the President Gerald Ford granted amnesty to those who had escaped the country in defiance of the draft.
I announced my intention to give these young people a chance to earn their return to the mainstream of American society so that they can, if they choose, contribute, even though belatedly, to the building and the betterment of our country and the world.
Furthermore, Vietnam War dodgers had a huge impact on grades inflation in American universities, results of which we can see even today. Until the Vietnam War, the average grade on a university's campus was C. The graph demonstrates the increase in percentage of A distribution, which in the end of the Vietnam War in 1973 increased almost twice, while the percentage of C, D, and F distributions decreased almost twice comparing to the pre-war time. The reason to that is that the universities were afraid to lose students due to the draft. Male students who received grade C and below were subject to selective service system. Stuart Rochester and Christopher Healy investigated the issue of grade inflation in their paper of 2002. They quoted the University of Florida professor.
The upward shift started in the jungles of Vietnam, when those of us now at the full professor level were safely in graduate school. We were deferred by virtue of being in school, which wasn't fair and we knew it. So when grading time came, we knew that giving a C meant that our student, who deserved a D, would go into the jungle. We did not want better and gave him a B.
Even professors, honorable men, had to deceive their sense of integrity because they knew that it was better than send boys to die in jungles, with the only purpose to increase income of huge military corporations' owners.
200 a day, maybe more. And these punks here against the United States Army, United States government, that's what you call anarchy and treason going against the United States government.
The entire dodging movement might seem extremely unpatriotic. I mean, why would you ever avoid a chance to defend your country? However, the civilian polls conducted by the Wall Street Journal and the Newsweek magazines revealed that the level of patriotism had never declined in the hearts of eligible for draft Americans.
American attitudes towards the war were changing simultaneously with the growing anti-war movement. At first, the Dodgers were portrayed as traitors. As the war escalated, the draft became a national concern. It was no longer a question of patriotism as it was during the World War II. Now, people simply did not understand what would they potentially give their lives for. Country's ego? Wealthy men who were trying to pull as much money as they could by the cost of young lives? Therefore, dodging became a method of escaping pointless deaths, as well as protesting the halt of any military actions in Vietnam.